Ignatius, when he was lying there convalescent, was wondering what to do with the rest of his life. And he discerned that he wanted to do that which bring the greatest glory to God. And he identified this with helping people and discerning what is the greatest good that he can do. And so part of the Ignatian spirituality is to look at the world and see what needs to be done. And one of the things Ignatius decided is that, there were people in hospitals who needed to help. And the very first Jesuits worked as male nurses. There were warring, feuding tribes in Italy. He tried to reconcile them. And then he was asked by the city fathers of Messina, because he and his early Jesuits were all college educated, if they would come and open a school for boys. And he thought, well, that's a good way to make a difference in society. So the whole idea of Jesuit education was not to create ivory towers where people will learn professions, but how to make an impact on people's lives so that they themselves can become leaders. And because humanist education was not cerebral, was aimed at the whole person, aimed at the heart, at imparting values, the aim of Jesuit education is value-centered leadership. And that has been a thrust really from the very beginning, and it goes back to the Renaissance roots.
Well, let me pick up on a word you used there. I don't know how consciously you used it, but you said that Ignatius was interested in making a difference. And this word difference is something that we struggle with sometimes in our academic institutions, because they are often much more homogeneous than we'd like to think they should be. And certainly here at Fairfield, for our Jubilee Year celebrations, we've chosen a theme which in a way you're inaugurating for us. And the theme we've chosen is the theme of listening to the voices of others. Does that resonate for you out of this tradition, how does it work?
Very, very much. In fact, Ignatian spirituality could be described as a listening spirituality. The retreatant is supposed to become very still, calm, and listen to the voice of God in his or her deepest desires. The retreat master doesn't do a lot of talking and directing, actually listens to the retreatant and asks questions and helps the retreatant to do this kind of listening. Ignatius, in his spiritual exercises, has a retreatant toward the end realize how everything is gift, how God is present in our world and in every part of it. Ignatian spirituality is very optimistic. We live in a universe of grace, and grace is in everyone's lives. Now this connected with the humanism, which found truth and beauty in the writings of these pre-Christians, of these pagans. Mm-hmm. And later Jesuit missionaries, in going out to India, Japan, China, found that they were not bringing God into people's lives. They were making them aware of the God who's already there. Now this, the word humanism today does not mean, simply an appreciation of the classics. It means the appreciation of the human and the fostering of the human wherever it comes from. And to realize that God is not only in one tradition or in one school or philosophy or in one faith tradition or in one culture, that we can learn from one another. I describe Ignatian spirituality as a listening culture. And the word listen means to bend over, to list, so I can hear better, so I can appreciate better. And we can discover God in people who are not like us, and people outside of our comfort zone. And I think this is one of the aims of the Jesuit education, to help our students to hear those voices of others, those people who are outside our comfort zone.
All right, so listening to the voices of others, and I also have popping into my mind there that Jesuit mantra thing, finding God in all things. So are you saying then that as these earlier Jesuits, they went out these foreign, distant countries, what they would have considered perhaps pagan even, and they were finding God in those cultures? Sure. That seems like a very modern point of view.
But they did it. You have Matteo Ricci, who comes to China and becomes a, a, a Confucian scholar who came to dress as a Mandarin, as a Confucian scholar, who by the way, coined the word Confucius as a way to Latinize Confucius, the great Chinese philosopher. And he read Confucius and he said, it's just like reading Seneca. I mean, as a boy, he read Seneca and Cicero, these great philosophers. He said he could learn from Confucius and could appreciate Confucius. You have Robert de Nobili doing the same thing in India and finding meaning and beauty in the Sanskrit scriptures of India.
And also kind of expressing their mission by sort of just being there, right? Not exactly, not trying to convert in any major way.
Interesting, not preaching, but simply entering into conversation. Again, if I said that listening, Ignatian spirituality is a matter of listening, right. It's a major part of conversation, what we're doing now, what you're doing with your audience.
I think it's really good because, listening to the voices of others is very definitely a matter of not drowning out what they have to say by our urge to say what we want to say. But your mention of Matteo Ricci makes me think of the second half of your book, because after you get past the exposition of the humanistic roots of the spirituality and you work some of those things out, you give us 5 chapters on what I take it are 5 different exemplary Jesuit humanists.
Exactly.
And the first of them is Ricci. So you've mentioned Ricci. Can you say a bit about the other 4, why they found their place in this book?
Well, the one who is least known, and I found Jesuits who had never heard of him, is Friedrich Spee. Very interesting man. I had never heard of him either until reading his name in a book by Karl Rahner, the great Jesuit theologian. And he said that Friedrich Spee, who stood with the women accused of witchcraft, and I saw a little check there in this book, and realized that I had made that little check light enough. It was a library book to tell myself to go and find out who this guy is. Well, I said, well, if I made that check 2 years ago, I better go now. And I discovered this man who was truly extraordinary, who was a Jesuit who heard the confessions of women in the 17th century who were being accused of witchcraft.
This is in Germany or Holland?
This is in Germany. And he went down into the dungeons. You know, he was on some ivory tower. You know, he went down there, and he experienced what they were seeing. And to use a phrase which the society has used in a recent decree about women in church and society, he listened to the voices of the women. He listened to these voices, and believed that they were free.
That they were others, but that they were women.
They were women, and they were accused of witchcraft, and he believed that they were accused falsely. And he risked his life to write a diatribe against the witch hunters and the witch trials of that day. He was doing some social analysis, we would say today, and looking at the roots of the problem. And he was accusing naive clerics who believed tales about women. He accused the peasant masses. He accused the magistrates who said, he said, you would not allow your hunting dogs to be treated this way as you allow these innocent people. And he let go this cry for justice, and it was eventually heard, and at risk of his life. He eventually died ministering to soldiers in the field, and was virtually forgotten until rediscovered recently.
So he was a sort of exciting, activist figure.
Yeah,
now, the other 3 you talk about, Karl Rahner, Pietà de Chardin, Pedro Arrupe, well, certainly a couple of them were more scholarly, right? More...
They're scholarly and translated for our day. I mean, if we need a conversation today, it's between science and religion. Some people think that they are inimical to one another. And in Pietà de Chardin, you had the scientist and the man of faith come together. He was really the first prominent Christian to embrace evolution and to say that evolution can be reconciled with Christian faith. And we need it. In our Jesuit schools, we have students study the Bible, but then also study evolution in science class. We have theologians who believe in evolution. We have scientists who believe in God. That these are voices which need to be reconciled, which need to come together.
Two stories that are not incompatible with
exactly,
one another.
And Pierre Desjardins exemplifies that.
Now, what about Karl Rahner, who most people can't understand when they even try to read him?
Because they don't realize that part of is kind of the roots of his theology are the spiritual exercises. I mean, his definition of a human person is reaching out. We are constantly longing for more, and that infinity, that never being satisfied, for him was precisely a sign of our spirituality, of our desire for more, which only the infinite God, the absolute mystery, can satisfy.
And the last of them is a man that, an activist again in a way for a portion of his life, Pedro Arrupe, former general of the Society of Jesus, a man whose name is on 2 buildings on our campus.
And a man who began life as a missionary in Japan. Well, his Jesuit ministry, where he immersed himself in Japanese culture and found the beauty. I mean, even after being a general, he would pray as a Japanese monk would, seated on his haunches, and who impressed upon the society the need to translate the Christian message into people's culture, as he did it into Japanese culture, into modern culture. But also a man who recognized the great disparities between rich and poor within societies and in between societies, and called the Society of Jesus to look at its origins, to look at its desire to make a difference in the world, and the society under his leadership assumed as its very identity the service of faith and the promotion of justice, and that all Jesuit enterprises were to be touched by this value, including therefore Jesuit education. So that Jesuit education today is described very often as educating men and women for others. But then, again, Renaissance accommodation. Being for others could imply a certain condescension. So today it's often being expressed as educating men and women for and with others, emphasizing the need for solidarity and kinship.
A great place to stop. This is a wonderful book. I enjoy reading every minute of it, and I recommend it to anybody who's watching.